Hello guys, welcome back to ESENtaxa. Andrea Vito here, and today we are going to talk about the Forfait Regime, Regime Forfettario, known in Italian, in 2024. Just want to remind you that if you're doing this channel, if this is the first time you're watching our channel, our videos, ESENtaxa is a channel in which we talk about tax optimization in specific jurisdiction. In particular in Italy, we are the #1 channel that in English language explains how to optimize your taxes if you want to relocate in Italy. In this specific video, I want to just focus your attention on the Forfait Regime, which is basically one of the best tax regimes that we have nowadays in Europe. You have to remember that in Europe, a lot of jurisdictions were pressed by the European Commission to remove the big tax benefit or certain tax schemes. Imagine NHR in Portugal disappeared. Also in Romania, they removed the 1% flat tax for freelancers. And also other jurisdictions, they get rid of their huge tax benefits, and other jurisdictions, they're simply raising their taxes. I'm going to first summarize how the Forfait Regime works, because you have to really understand the powerful this regime. And then I'm going to explain you how the Social Security works, how much Social Security you have to pay when you're running a business with this tax regime. And this tax regime is addressed to to self-employed or freelancers, so not to employee or individual for miscellaneous type of incomes. If you want to stay in contact with us, in the description below the video you will have our email, info@esentaxa.com, or you can book a consultancy call with us, 20 minutes, 1 hour, 1 hour plus tax simulation, which is one of our main services to help you to understand if the relocation to Italy makes sense before I had a possible relocation. And tax-wise, you will know in advance how much taxes you're going to pay. Now, let's go straight to the point. Regime forfettario is the Italian word of forfait regime. Why this name? First of all, the forfait regime, it's a regime that allows you to pay only 5% flat tax. And when I say flat tax, it's a taxation that substitutes the Italian progressive taxation. So you pay only 5% tax on the revenue as a self-employed or freelancer. Now, it's 5% flat tax on 85,000 euro as a revenue per year. That's the limit, above which you have to turn into ordinary progressive taxation. It's not like a tax bracket, so as you pass this threshold, everything will turn into progressive taxation in Italy, okay? So if you stay below this threshold, and after the video I'm going to explain you how to also pass this threshold without paying a lot of taxes, but this is, if you stick to the end of this video, you will learn how to do it. So if you respect this threshold, by default you have 5% flat tax, and after 5 years becomes 15%. Okay, so this is the basic rule of the forfait regime. There are very few requirements to access it. It should be your first activity, and you are qualified as a startup activity, and thanks to that qualifications you get 5%. Of course, if you're coming from abroad, if you're moving to Italy, of course this is the first startup position, so it's quite obviously you will be able to benefit from this tax regime. The other restriction is that you should not be shareholder of a company or controlling shareholder of a company that run exactly the same business. That's it. This is the only two requirements. Okay, there are other requirements, but it's mostly done respect by who are already living in Italy, and we are going to discuss in the consultancy, again, our email contact in the description below the video. Now, you pay 5% and 50% on 85,000. Actually, the word forfait means that based on your type of activity, which is in Italy described by as a code called Ateco code, so you will get an Ateco code, which is the description of your activity, okay? So, based on the activity, the Italian state determines how much taxes you should not pay on that specific income. Let me explain it better. How much you can have a deduction based on your type of activity. And this deduction can be spanned from 22% up to 60%. Okay, so this is the range. Why? For example, if you're a consultant, the Italian state assumes that 22% of your revenue is cost, is expenses. So you don't really have to account the real cost, even though you are pay for some furniture, for example, for your activity. As a consultant, you might pay for a laptop, for example. You won't be, this expenses won't be considered you don't have to account, which means you spare also on accountability and accounting, we account in Italy, but the state gives you 22% tax, okay? It gives you 22%, it gives you 22% deduction. So 85,000 euro will be squeezed and will be actually, you are going to be taxed on 66,300 euro, okay? That's it. And then you calculate the 5% on this amount and not on this amount. If you are a consultant, so if your type of code describes you as a person that qualifies 22% deduction cost forfait. That's it. This is how it works. Instead, if you are a trader of goods, services, if you're running an online business, classical example as e-commerce, so you have let's say a place where you store your goods, your materials that you're going to sell, then the Italian states, in this case, it considers 6% of your revenue as expenses, because by logic, this is the type of business that has a lot of expenses, regardless if you had those expenses or not. So you are entitled to get 60% deduction, so you're not going to pay 5% of the 85,000, but you're going to pay 5% on, I wrote everything this time on my notes, on 35,000 euro, okay? Consequently, if you are going to calculate taxes on these two numbers, here it's going to be 2.9% tax rate pressure, and here it's going to be 3.9% here and 2.9% here, okay? Again, 2.9% tax pressure here and 3.9% tax pressure. So this is the real tax pressure on the forfeit regime based on the type of activity. So far, so good. I have explained this also in the previous videos, but now let me explain you the most important point, the hot topic, how much social security I'm going to pay on the forfeit regime as a self-employed, as a freelancer. We know that in Italy the social security is quite high, so let's see how is the impact on your pocket, on your net pocket with the social security in these calculations. So the taxes we know, 3.9 and 2.9. Of course, I also calculated for you if you pass 5 years, so it's gonna be the effective tax rate will be 11.7% and 6%. Okay, so those are the tax rates if you pass the first 5 years. So if the tax rate here will be 15%, calculated on this will be 11.7, and calculated on this it's 6%. I'm extremely precise and transparent on this specific video, okay? Now, let's calculate the social security. In Italy, the social security as a freelancer or self-employed who is moving to Italy for the first time, which is not somebody that studied in Italy, that makes some exams to become a certain type of profession, for example, engineers, lawyers, accountants, they have a specific type of imps if they got an public exams in Italy. So there are several types of imps, but for you that you're a foreigner moving to Italy, basically you most likely end up having the choice between two types of imps, which is not really a choice, but depends on your Ateco code. And here again, Ateco code is extremely important. The description of your activity determines the deductibility percentage and also the type of imps, the type of social security that you're going to pay. And this makes a lot of difference. So in Italy, you can have the imps called, I'm going to say the Italian names because we don't have English translations here, fortunately. Imps in gestione separata, which could be translated somehow as separate management. Okay. And the other type of imps, which is called commercianti, which is traders, and artigiani, which is artisans. So either you fall on this type of imps or on this type of imps. There are this is the only two options. And this, the determination of the imps is based on the type of activity, okay? Now, in these imps, you pay 26.23% of your taxable income as a social security. Here you pay 24.48. Let's say 24.5, just to be rounded a bit, because here the calculation is 24 up to a certain income, and then it becomes 24.4, then 0.6. Okay, so the average is 24.5% for this type of imps. What's the difference between those two types of imps? Simple. This works only in percentage. So if you don't earn anything, you don't pay anything. Easy. So this is always in percentage. Instead, this one has a minimum cap. So if your income is below 17,000 euro per year, you still pay 24.5 on 17, okay, which is around 4,000 euro per year, okay? So that's the difference. You pay a little less, but you have the disadvantage of always paying the minimum, calculating the Social Security on a figurative minimum income, okay? So below this, you cannot go. And that's the issue when you don't preview to earn anything. It's going to be a problem because you're obliged to pay your Social Security if you might not invoice more than 17K, okay? So these are the two typologies. How this calculation works in the forfait regime. Let's see. You're going to pay 26% not on 85,000, also here the same idea, but you're going to pay 26% on 66,000 if your deduction is 22, or 26.23 on 34,000 if your deduction is 60. Here I put some dots, which means that you might also have a take-home code that puts you in the middle, so you might have basically an average of these two. These are two boundaries, two borders that you can have also a percentage in the middle based on your type of activity, as I said before. Now, what is the real calculation? So it's not 26 that you're going to pay, but here, let's follow this line. If you are in commercianti artigiani, you're going to pay 20.45%, okay? And if you're in this column, if your deduction is 60%, under gestione separata, imps, gestione separata, GS, I'm going to call it like this, is going to be 10.49%, okay? If you're using this, if you're falling to this one, okay? And then you know how much is the overall. It's 20.45 plus 3.9 for the first 5 years and 11 after 5 years, okay? Because here is 15% and here is 5%, okay? While if you're in a good in a maximum deduction option, then you will pay 2.9% plus 10%. So basically your tax pressure will be 13%, okay? Here and 24% here. So this is the actual tax rate and Social Security combined when you are using the forfait regime with gestione separata type of Social Security, type of percentage. Instead, if you have the imps commercianti artigiani, this is a little less. This will be 19.11% of Social Security, and here will be 9.8% of Social Security, okay? If you have imps as commercianti and artigiani, so it's CA, and here CS, okay? So these are the percentage of Social Security you might fall into. This is the interval on the forfait regime. So you might have, based on a take-home code, the deductibility that determines your real tax pressure and determines your real Social Security pressure in the situation of gestione separata or in the situation of commercianti artigiani. I hope that was clear, okay? Now, if you think that this is too much to pay, I'm going to explain you tax optimization that we can do on the forfait regime and even reduce this amount of percentage. So stick with me.